I'm sure by now everybody's familiar with the European energy crisis. Some of the numbers of the percentage increases in terms of energy prices have been staggering. However, we're currently here in Europe, we're located in Athens at the moment as we travel around the EU, and we've seen these inflationary pressures not just on the energy front, but also in the cost of living pressures in terms of food and those other components. So today I wanted to dive into the European energy crisis, talk about some of the drivers, and have a look at some charts and visuals to really help conceptualize the scale of this impact, and ultimately what are those economic risks and uncertainties that could flow out of a crisis that unfortunately is unresolved, and there's still significant risks in the near to medium term future. And so just having a look at some of these headlines here, I'm sure you'd be familiar with them, but European electricity traders stating it's very, very scary. Keeping the lights on Europe this winter may prove more difficult than governments are currently admitting. Or on the other side, forget showering, it's eat or heat for shocked Europeans hit by this energy crisis. It is significant, it seems stark, but when you look at some of the numbers, you can see why these discussions are starting to play out. In terms of what's the story itself, of course, we know the key driver has been the Ukrainian situation. This has put significant pressure on supply chains. There, of course, have been significant reliance on some specific supply chains, and these have either been disrupted, halted, or at the moment cancelled. And as a result of that, this has seen a significant uplift in terms of prices, but there are other contributing factors too. We know that Europe, along with other regions around the world, has had a heat wave for this past period. This has put pressure on aging infrastructure. Obviously at this current stage, we haven't yet got the renewables in place, the significant enough infrastructure on that side to soak up that demand. There's a range of contributing factors, but ultimately the end result is that energy's share of household spending is hitting record highs, rising bills are forcing households to cut energy use, and obviously Europe has been disproportionately affected in comparison to other regions around the world. You can see here at this visual, so it's got a number of those leading European economies there. You can see where they're currently positioned, but what I'd like to draw your attention to is OECD, which is a cooperation of many leading economies around the world, which is the red visual there. You can see it's much lower than some nations such as Italy or Germany in terms of the gas prices for families on this index. As we go through, I'd love to know your thoughts, so drop in a comment below what you've been making of it and what you think it means both for individuals, but also that broader macroeconomic picture. In terms of why it's an issue, I think first and foremost, it obviously disproportionately affects individuals and households. But as we can see here, just to understand the scale of it, a UK charity called National Energy Action estimates that nearly 9 million UK households could be in fuel poverty after October. To understand what fuel poverty is defined as, it's the need to spend 10% or more of income on energy for a household. And as you can see here, this visual shows that on the home plus vehicle front, we've got UK families to spend 10% of household income on gas on average, and then all home energy is around 7%. So this is a significant issue. It's going to mean that individuals are spending more on these things that really are core to being able to survive. They're going to have less discretionary spend, which is going to be an issue for growth. But ultimately, it's not even about the discretionary spend. It's about the ability just to be able to pay bills, to keep the lights on. And obviously, if you have to choose between eating or heating yourself, obviously we've just had a hot summer, but what happens as we get into winter over those upcoming months as well? What's going to happen to individuals, households and businesses too? We know that inflation affects lowest income households the most. It's a disproportionate effect on that front. And in terms of what's occurring at that more macro picture then, we know that the European region is disproportionately affected and at the greatest risk of recession due to everything that's playing out. Obviously the Ukrainian situation is still unresolved. There's a range of different politics and discussions in terms of what's happening to the supply chains as well on the gas front too. And what's worth kind of drawing your attention to on this front is we can see here the United States over the long run has always had generally higher gas prices in comparison to say OECD and the average of the top 5 European companies particularly. But over this past period, we've seen the average of the top 5 European economies go above the United States, which obviously has attracted a lot of attention and a lot of eyes about what's going to happen. And we know that the recessionary risks and the recessionary calls for the European region have started to grow and grow over this past period. In terms of what are the risks, there are obviously a few of them. First and foremost, if you're new here, welcome. Plenty of videos on the markets and all things macroeconomics, so make sure you've subscribed and turn your bell notifications on and hit that like button as well. In terms of the cost of living, obviously this is the first one. Households are spending more and more. We've talked about that earlier on, but these inflationary pressures are being coupled with the cost of living in terms of food and everything else on that front. In terms of the economic recession, the reason why this is such an issue is firstly, energy is such a core component of every business's back end. Whether you're driving things around in your trucks, whether you're getting things delivered to your individual stores as well, whether you're an individual with an online business or you've got a huge retail presence, you will have energy as some part of your expenses, and obviously rising pressures are going to put an effect onto your business's expenses and costs. But along with that as well, to try and dampen demand, we've seen different governments around the European region talk about potential shutdowns, potential reductions in terms of energy output for businesses as well as households. And this ultimately, if businesses are going to be shutting down for certain hours or periods of time or for days, or if there's going to be insufficient energy to help to fuel their business operations, this is going to put pressure on the economic output and activity. And then finally, one of the third discussion points as well is the divergence in terms of fortunes and also where these individual nations are positioned. Obviously, not all European nations are going to be equal. We know that Germany has been significantly affected due to the Nord Stream pipeline to Russia, but each individual nation is going to be affected depending on the different supply chains they've got set up, the different processes and the agreements and the contracts that they've got set up. So it's going to be interesting to see how they will navigate this and how they come together, or what it's going to mean for the actual makeup of the energy mix within the European region and for diplomatic negotiations and discussions too. In terms of where we finish, I think first and foremost, it's most important to remember that obviously we talk about the macroeconomic picture and everything happening at a broader level, but this is affecting individuals and it's affecting households. When we look at the total energy prices for European families, it's at a record high. There is inflationary pressures all throughout our society and the economy, but this is just one more pressure on top of everything playing out. We're about to head into the winter period over the next few months. Obviously, being able to keep the heater on during those, if it becomes a bitterly cold winter night, is going to be important. And so thoughts go out to individuals affected, and we'll continue to watch to see how this situation plays out. If you are interested, we've done a range of different videos on the channel. You can check these out now. A big thank you for joining us. Let us know your thoughts with a comment below. For now, stay well and happy investing.